to Play to Your Best, a summit bringing together experts in mindset, nutrition, training, recovery. And we have the incredible Tanya Jones joining us today. So welcome, Tanya.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I am glad you are among many incredible humans in bringing in and sharing with us your expertise. And your expertise is in sport as a coach. You're an NCCP coach, a holistic nutritionist. You are a strength coach and conditioning coach as well. So pulling those really important pieces together, particularly for athletes in perimenopause and beyond. And specifically, you work with that group of athletes as well.
I do, yes.
Yeah.
And that's myself included. So it's kind of a little bit self-serving as well, but it makes sense.
Well, it certainly brings us, we had some conversations, and it's really interesting is of how we come into this space is so often spurred, like I would say most often spurred by our own experiences with hormones or changing hormones, or
absolutely
really we've discovered in our lives. And so that is exactly how it is for you. So is there anything that you really wanted me to stand out in? And that you also have a partner, Sarah Cuff. I think that's always useful to know because I think it's actually demonstrating how coaching is changing as well.
Absolutely. So I met Sarah Cuff when I went to do my certification for holistic nutrition. I met her before and I used her as my nutritionist. And then I met her again when I went for my certification, and she was one of the instructors specifically teaching the sports nutrition component. And we just reconnected. And once I graduated, she reached out and thought maybe it would be nice for us to collaborate. And it had been something that I had always wanted. I work by myself most of the time and really missed that community portion of working with other coaches. And it was really nice to have that collaboration. So we have our own facets within Eat to Run. And then we come together under the umbrella of holistic nutrition sports coaches that are available for a variety of different type of athletes. And so you have a nice choice of who you'd like to work with. And then we can work in the background supporting each other and working together to do our own presentations and webinar series as well.
Yeah, I think that it's important to point out, just because it's the face of coaching is changing, or I'd like to think it is, because I think that, quite frankly, I think that we're leading the way.
Yeah.
Just being a little self-serving and saying that.
Yes.
Because, it's very difficult if one is trying to do it on their own. And the reason why I say that is because the expectation as well, and the need for knowledge and to be coaching appropriately, the bar has shifted significantly.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
And I know this isn't really what we're going to talk about today, because we want to get into the specifics for athletes, but I think it's an okay place to also start, because the bar has shifted. We need to know more. We can do better. And in order to serve the athletes that we have in our lives correctly, I think that it is doing us a disservice to think that one person can actually do it alone.
I absolutely agree. Yes.
It's a tall order, and almost, I would say, an impossible one if you really because the more you know, the more you don't know.
I agree with that as well. As you start to diversify how you coach, as you should, coaching strategies have changed. The information, even if you just look at, we have wearable devices for everything, and you need to now interpret that data. And there's just different strategies that we have. It's so hard to know what strategies are working and what's working for what population. And so the more you have access to other coaches, just in conversation of what's working for you, or I have this scenario that's come up and maybe I don't know how to handle it and would prefer to get resources from somebody I know to share and to be able to then serve our athletes more effectively in a holistic and whole approach, versus here's just a program, do the workout and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And that's something to be interested in too, like for those athletes that, or people that don't know if they need a coach or where to even start, is that's definitely one of the questions that would be worthwhile, is like, well, what's your network?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Who
it comes
who are
down
you
to
working with?
who are
Because
you working with and what's your style? If you're not a communicator, that may not work well for you and your athlete because you're not going to be able to pull information. So the more you have the ability to communicate with other people, and it's just a dialogue with athletes, with other coaches, more information, ultimately more performance for the people who are seeking us out for help.
yeah. Yeah. All right. That was a bit of a tangent right off the start. So that's how this is going to go. But we actually do have a couple of things that we really want to touch base on, and and share coming from your expertise in this area. And one of those is, we hear so much about stress. Stress.
Yes.
Let's all manage our stress. How is it that you are utilizing nutrition specifically to manage stress as an athlete, or somebody that exercises as well? We don't, however you define that, in perimenopause and beyond.
I think when we look at when you're at that point in your life for perimenopause and menopause, there's so many stresses that are happening within your body that you necessarily don't have control over. And so one thing that you can control, and something that we have to do, is to eat. We have to eat, we have to feed our bodies. So if we can utilize that part of something we have to do and support our bodies with this task, then we can control stress and support our bodies where we can. And so I kind of like to use nutrition as to manage and to support where we can, because there's often things in our life that we can't. We're never going to get rid of stress completely. That's an unrealistic statement, because we're athletes in whatever capacity that might be. And we're actually stressing our bodies on purpose for an outcome that we're trying to adapt from. And so I like to use nutrition to support that pathway as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple different ways that I like to approach it. And first is really just focusing on digestive health and resiliency, because if you're not absorbing the nutrition that you're taking in, whatever that might be, you're not going to have the building blocks to manage your hormone fluctuations or your sporting endeavor. And so really, I think before you would even look at any other aspect of nutrition, you'd be looking at what kind of nutrition do you want to use to support digestive health, because you need that foundation in order to get the nutrition to where you want it to be within your body to have access.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. We actually have had two experts in this series. So to speak directly to digestive health or gut health, and looking at leaky gut, and encourage people to look at those interviews.
Oh, that's great.
Specifically. Yeah. So, because you're absolutely right. If we don't start there,
yeah,
it doesn't, you're not, that the foundation isn't there.
That's right. And so let's pass people on to let's go get some more information from those presentations specifically. But I think that needs to be the foundation before you can even address anything else, because we can do all the right things and eat the right foods and have the right nutrient timing. But if you're not absorbing, you're not really getting the benefit from it. So first and foremost, prioritizing getting your digestive system in order. Same as cleaning your house, or I like to clean my desk before I do a big job or get ready to work. So clean your house, clean your digestive system, get that ready to go. And then I think another thing I work with a lot of endurance athletes, is that sometimes our focus ends up being carbohydrates. And I think one step before that, it should actually be protein, especially for women, and especially for aging women, and especially for athletic women. You need, again, to have the building blocks of protein to be able to build muscles, to be able to put together your hormones and have enzymes available to facilitate all of the physiological processes within your body. And all of those are going to be built from protein. So you need to give your body the building blocks to create the workers that are going to create your muscles and to create your hormones and to help to manage your physiological pathways. And the more you can have those resources available, the less internal stress your body is going to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies don't know the difference between I'm stressed out internally because I don't have the resources, or my job's really hectic today and that's giving me stress. It just mounts the same stress response. And so if we can give our body the nutrients that we need, and I think protein is a significant one to start with, which will lead into my next sort of thought with that, is that if you have a good base, solid foundation of giving yourself adequate protein, it's part of maintaining balanced blood sugar, which would be my next really important point for managing stress, where you can control it, is to have balanced blood sugar. Does that make sense as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm a massive proponent, having done the education and metabolic efficiency training with Bob C. Bohar, which is all about managing blood sugar.
Yes.
It's totally all about it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, very much so. And there's a lot of nuances to that about why we want to do that. But it is one of the aspects is absolutely to, that stress response and bringing down, how we manage that insulin spiking and dropping, and what
That's
the
exactly
demand
right.
on our body actually is for that. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that? Because I think it's a great thing to talk to.
Yeah, so that would be, if you've got your gut working, and then the next thing you want to look at is balancing your blood sugar. And there's lots of different, diet trends or methods out there, and some work for some people. But I think unless you're in a really good place hormonally, you really need to focus on keeping that blood sugar balanced. And the importance of that is, if you are not eating enough and you're going into your body needs resources, and we're talking to a population that's active, and so we need fuel for what we're doing. And if you're not feeding your body enough resources, that's going to be a stress on your body, and it's going to mount a stress response, which is going to pull glucose, which is your form of energy that you can use, out of your stored muscle cells and your liver. But it's going to pull, it doesn't know how much to pull. Your body just like, I don't have enough resources, I'm going to now grab a whole bunch from my internal stores. And if you're not actively working out or doing something at that specific moment, now you're going to have too much blood sugar or sugar in your blood, and your body doesn't like that either. So then it's going to send insulin in to open the doors of your cells to put it back in. And that's fine every once in a while, but if that's a chronic situation for you, that this stress response is being mounted, and it's not just from not having enough fuel, it's the entire stress response. Eventually, insulin can't open the doors of your cells. You become insulin resistant. And so that sugar still needs to be pulled out of your bloodstream. And so now it gets packaged into a fat cell. And so often that's when you might see body composition changes, and quite commonly it's around your midsection. So you see that visceral fat deposition. And that's not great, because, we're generally trying to push a body composition to a bit more lean muscle mass for the most part. But on top of that, the more body fat you may be carrying, that in itself produces estrogen. So I'm going off on a little bit of a spiral here, but the more estrogen you're producing from cells that aren't supposed to be producing estrogen, it puts you into a position of being estrogen dominant, which has a lot of repercussions that people are already dealing with when you're in perimenopause, with estrogen progesterone fluctuation. And I'm sure you probably have some presenters that will be expanding upon that. Am I making myself
clear?
Yeah,
no, not so much. We haven't actually talked a ton about that. And I think it's interesting, because the body is in some ways in perimenopause this gaining of having this 8 to 10 pound weight change is absolutely normal. And because our body is losing estradiol, and you and I are using these names quite, purposefully, and saying, okay, so our estradiol is going down, but when we gain that fat, the other estrogens
right.
are actually trying to like ramp up a little bit here, and that's normal. I think what you're talking about, and for some females, no matter what they do, you're going to gain that weight, and that's just fine. Like, that is actually
For sure.
your body working darn hard to try to balance things out, and
Absolutely.
well done, body.
Yeah.
And it is not, it will shift again. Like, this is a shift to support.
Yeah.
That 8 to 10 pounds is a shift to support. And when your body adjusts, it often, very often, is that will actually be gone again. So
yes.
it's a time and period. But I think what you're speaking to is the different aspect of, if we are starting to change. Now, there's so many reasons why we might change and have that estrogen increase because of fat deposition. If we are looking at timing or so many other things. So do you want to speak to, you can absolutely speak to that, as well.
Yes, I think sort of what the point of that little side ramble was really, those mechanisms are going to happen during perimenopause. So if you can set yourself up to be having as much control over the stress response, then you're not going to be compounding something that is likely already going to be happening. So that's sort of where I was going with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's something that is likely going to happen. If you can manage your blood sugar, it's just one less place for your body to be coping or to be producing stress and maybe shifting a hormone response to the way you don't want it to be. And it doesn't have to be that way, because you can take charge of controlling your blood sugar. So we've kind of gone through why having fluctuating blood sugar might send you in a direction of hormone fluctuation and creating a stress response. And so what we want to do is to take some time to focus on your meals and your timing of your meals so that you don't have that fluctuation in blood sugar. Does that make sense? You were
No, absolutely. Do you want to go and share a little bit more about how that looks?
Yeah. So what I really like to do is keep it simple, and it doesn't have to be any crazy trend or diet fad. But if you just look at each meal that you're consuming and have protein, which we know is really important, carbohydrates, which are also really important, it's good fuel for our body and it's balanced, and some good quality fats. If every meal has those three components, you're going to have a balanced intake of nutrition. And having protein and fats coming in at the same time as carbohydrates, you're not going to have that insulin spike, because the sugar is going to slowly be delivered into your body, because it takes longer to process, in conjunction with fats and protein, which also take longer to process. And that's going to make you feel fuller for longer. It's going to give you the energy you need to do the activities that you want to do, plus the building blocks to support your body for all of those activities. Meanwhile, your body is like, oh, I've got a little bit of sugar, a little dose, nice and consistent. I don't need to freak out. Everything's fine. I can just carry on maintaining homeostasis and deliver that energy where I need it to go. So it's just one less stress response. Not everyone's food motivated. So to say to eat, 3 meals and 2 snacks may be a challenge for some people. So maybe you need to go to like 3 good sized meals that are balanced. If you're just, I don't want any of this to be adding stress to your lifestyle. That's the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So starting with just trying to balance your meals and have it be consistent of when you feel hungry, or even time it out if you're not motivated, just to give yourself a little reminder to have some food.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way just to maintain that balanced blood sugar.
It is interesting how you're talking a little bit about the timing and the importance of that, and how our hormones are responding to that timing is something I talk about with my athletes as well, is like understanding that hormones are really connected to the circadian and infradian rhythms. And so how we feel that hunger, ghrelin, is actually timed, and how we, like, everything within our body loves routine. We love routine. And we want to think of ourselves as spontaneous and, like, doing like crazy things. And yet our body is just like, yeah, no, I need to sleep at the same time because that's going to help my blood sugar as well. I need to, I like to train at the same time, to do everything at the same time.
Yes.
And it's interesting, right? Like, so if you're living a really, really variable life, then maybe that's something to look at.
Absolutely. And so I do actually work with a lot of shift workers who are also multi-sport athletes. And so to try to manage how to train through that, how to eat through that. And it's the nutrition component that is the most challenging, the nutrition and the sleep components that are the most challenging when you have a structure of unstructured time. So they're always working shift work, and it's variable. It's maybe not even as consistent as the same days are the same shifts. And so usually it does come down to, I don't know what to eat. It's 8 a.m, but for me, that's dinner time. So do I eat breakfast or do I eat dinner? And so it's trying to find pathways to do that, to get sleep, and then to, like you said, manage your hunger cues, whether you're getting them or not.
Yeah.
Depending on your sleep patterns.
Yeah. Super interesting. Is there any other points in the nutrition that you find before we put on your other hat?
I do think that another, like, probably one of the other main points is you need to feed your body for your current activity level.
Good point.
Often you might be periodized throughout the year, depending on what you're training for, or maybe you're coming from injury, or you're ramping up to a sport that you're just learning. You have to fuel your body for those levels of activity. And I think prioritizing, for example, for multi-sport athletes, so what I coach is mostly swim, bike, run, prioritizing that carbohydrate intake around your activities so you have it for supporting what you're doing, and you're not then running into the challenges of insulin spikes at other points in the day because you're going to be using those carbohydrates. But definitely, I do find sometimes the challenges people might be trying to modify their body composition through exercise and through a lot of activity, and may find that I don't want to eat too much because that might be counterproductive to my body composition goal. But often it's not counterproductive. It's going to support your ability to be able to perform at the levels that you're after, which ultimately will end up modifying or moving your body composition to where you want it to go. And you'll be able to perform for a long time. If you're depleting and not feeding your body enough, you can get away with that for a while, but over time, you're going to then be under stress, and you're going to run into injuries, and you're going to lose your capacity for performance. And so just not being afraid to fuel your performance and to fuel your current activity levels. And that may be something that would make sense to sit down with calculations and run the numbers. Not that you need to be a slave to a number, but just to maybe have some knowledge behind how to move forward with how much you might need to take in per day for your protein and your carbohydrates.
I think that it's interesting because I'm just thinking right now of we are in this interesting spot for athletes of, and I think it is quite unique, of not eating enough for our training. And again, not eating around the training that we have. That's definitely prevalent in our population. And also like the hold back that, what is a calorie? What is this whole idea of where are we starting from? And I think that having like you just mentioned, it's not that we have to continue to do this, but having an awareness of where your starting point is, because these estimates of calories are so far off anyway. Like they're so not true that it's not about the number ever. It's actually just saying, okay, well, in the ballpark, are you in this ballpark?
Yes.
Are you in the game, or are you like way out in left field here? Because honestly, there's such a bell curve of error that but we still want to know, like, are we out there? Like, are we on the extremes of I'm forgetting to eat and I have 1,200 calories coming in per day? Or am I in I'm a normally active person and I'm getting about 2,200. I'm just coming up with numbers. Right. So this is, I think we play this balance because so many are just like, we don't need to calorie count, or we don't want to do that, or, it's too much for people. And if you are not triggered, like this is talking to a population that are not triggered and need to do other type of work to be able to say, okay, so now I'm okay. I would like to find out, and I have a good relationship with food to do that investigative analysis. And I think that that's a coaching relationship that you want to be in and be specific to. But in general, I think your point is really excellent to say, let's get aware. Let's see where we're at. Mm-hmm.
Let's find out where we're at, what you need, because you set these goals for what you want to do. And so let's fuel being able to get that goal. And you could always, if it is a bit triggering for you to know the numbers, you don't have to find them yourself. You can have someone find the numbers and then give you examples of what a pre-workout meal would look like, what a regular meal portion size would look like. You don't have to know the numbers from it. This could be just an example of here's what you should have for breakfast. Here's some during activity nutrition, and here's a recovery nutrition option. And then you can at least be supporting while you maybe then start to develop some habits that put you in a better place with your relationship to food.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Okay, so we've got the basis from a nutritional standpoint. So you and I are very aligned. I'm like, okay, so the nutrition hat. Okay, got it.
That's right. Okay,
now let's move on to training. Let's talk training. So how one of the questions that I commonly get in our Facebook group, Athletes Thriving and Perimenopause and Beyond, is how do we balance the strength and the endurance? And how is it that you are coming into this conversation?
Yeah, so I really believe strength training is so important. And even if you are an endurance athlete, it's part of your training. The same as recovery is also part of your training. If you factor it in, it needs to be part of the conversation. While your sport may be, for most of my athletes, swim, bike, run, to do those things, you also need to strength train. And so there's different ways that you can approach it. I often like to add some specific mobility and strength work post workout. And so a lot of my athletes have a little routine that they would do post run. And it's part of the stretching, but it's planned. So this is part of your workout. So they get to make the little box green when they do it. And it's often mobility to get them to be able to recruit muscles after doing an activity. So can you still get your core to engage? Can you still get your glutes to engage after a track session? So that if you're doing an Ironman, for example, by the time you get to the run, you're already tired. Can you still hold your core? Can you still get your glutes to fire when you're already a little bit fatigued? And it's not long, it's 10 minutes. So it's just a little chunk of work to do post session. And you're already doing the session, you're nice and warm, and it just becomes part of it. So it's not a separate activity, which can usually get dropped. It became part of the activity that you were scheduled for. I often will periodize training. And so I might do some more heavy lifting focused work in whenever your off season might be. And I think that every athlete should have an off season. You do need to let your brain and your body recharge from what you're doing and have some time where you can just mix things up a little bit. And so I usually will prioritize a period of time where there's going to be some gym focused work and not just maintenance work. Now you're going to lift some heavy weights, especially for women. When you're conditioned enough and have the skill to lift heavy, you don't just go from first time to doing full body weight deadlifts. So once you have the skill to be able to do that, just to recruit those muscle fibers to be able to contract strong and to generate some power and help you with having that neuromuscular reaction and to maintain bone density. So I'll periodize that in throughout the year. And often how I would do that so people don't worry about losing the fitness that they've gained in those 3 sports throughout the year is that I will often rotate the weeks. And so maybe one week it's 2 bikes, 2 swims, 3 runs, 2 strength. And then I'll move the next week would be 3 swims, 2 runs, 2 strength, however it fits into the schedule. But I'll pull one sort of cardio workout and I'll replace that with the strength workout. If I can, I'll try to do 2. Just depends, having the relationship with your athlete and seeing the buy-in that you can get. And again, I want to create a healthy, happy body and mind without adding stress to the situation. And so if pulling too many cardio workouts, it's the relationship that you build that way. And I will often add, am I making sense so far?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. I will often add a couple strength moves into certain workouts. So you don't have to go to the gym for an hour to get a strength session. We don't always have time for that, even if you are in the off season. And so if you're at the pool, maybe you go for your swim, and then when you finish, you go upstairs and do 2 heavy weighted moves. You're nice and warmed up, and then go for the rest of your day. So you could go upstairs and do your 3 reps of heavy squat 5 times, and then off you go and carry on with the rest of your day. Or if you're lucky and you're at home and you're on a trainer for your bike, you might do a bike session and then use some weights that you have at home. And right as you finish, do a couple strength moves that are going to be a little bit heavier, kind of focused, and then off you go with your stretches and your post-workout and carry on from there. So it's not that you have to dedicate hours and hours to just strength training. If you can slip it into a lot of different places and still get the benefit. You don't have to strengthen your body for an hour at a time to reap the benefit of doing a full complement of squats or deadlifts or core work.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love that you're doing and you're integrating into your program is the research is really strong. James Clear is this idea of habit stacking. And if you have gotten to some consistency and are showing up for yourself in these training sessions, then that's phenomenal. And let's stack onto that. And that's what you're really talking about. And I love it also that this, I remember, and Amanda Thebe was one of the first speakers in my first summit, and she in her book, she writes about, workout snacking. And yes. I love it how you're peppering the workout snacks into, other activities of doing things. I can all of a sudden, just see, or you've just, finished your track workout and you're going to just do some walking lunges or, get those glutes going, or just, on the bench, you're just going to do some bridge ups. And I think it's a really important thing for people to hear, because I think you're right when you talked about, like, you don't have to go to the gym for the hour. And how do we, so that's not possible. So what is possible? Yeah. And having some flexibility in how we deliver a program as coaches, having flexibility, but also having flexibility as athletes to say, I see that you have put a strength program into my thing. That's great. Okay. So there's 2 exercises, like I know when my strength trainer, Anne, brings and develops our programs, like we literally have 2 strength heavy, like we're in the heavy off season right now. So a lot of the athletes are doing that, and they have two things that they do. They just do over and over again. And it's like literally keeping it small, but maybe you need to even separate those. So then, you know,
Absolutely.
like I think that that's such a great point and such a phenomenal thing that you're doing for the athletes that you're working with to keep them motivated, to keep them engaged with it. Beautiful.
I think it brings down the overwhelmed feeling of how do I fit that in? And it's something, especially if it's new, if you're not someone who's done strength training before, to go from strictly endurance sport to now spending an hour in the gym, that can be really intimidating, overwhelming, and it's not likely to happen because it's going to be too much to initiate the process. But to be, you're just going to do 2 things today. And maybe you do 2 things every day that are different. And then you've got a full body workout throughout the week, and you've addressed all of your muscles and potentially any imbalances that you can have from are addressed from specific activities. If the easier you can make things, the more compliance you can have. And then ultimately your athlete gets the goal that they're after.
Yeah, no, I love what you're doing. Is there anything else that you wanted to straight before we go into our third point that we really wanted to bring forward?
I do think that it's just really important for any strength conditioning component of just meeting athletes where they're at. So some people aren't going to be ready to lift heavy. Just might need a few weeks of prep to get ready to do these things, depending on their skill level. If you're always going in this plane of motion, moving laterally could be a really new experience, and the balance and the coordination might not be there. So just meeting athletes where they're at and setting up an appropriate progression as you would if they were just starting to run or do another activity. So even though it's a little bit different, still making sure that it's where they're at, not what the other person you've worked with is doing.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so now we're managing our stress, we are balancing, and we are consistent with our workouts and including strength, where it's sometimes difficult if you're very busy, because this is actually not just for multi-sport, like you're speaking directly to a multi-sport athlete, but this is also for anybody who is just loves to do their run workouts and just don't have time to get that strength workout. Then you have some new ideas of how that might be possible for you. Now, one of the things, and the last thing that we really wanted to touch base on when we were preparing for this interview was, how do our performance goals, how do we manage our performance goals as our bodies are changing in perimenopause or in the beyond? And it could be also just for like aging. How do we think about that differently, or how do you speak to your athletes about that?
Yeah, so I think some of this sort of depends on where you're at and how long you've been an athlete for. So that's going to directly relate to how things are going to outcome in the future. So if you're still a relatively new athlete, even though there's some physiological changes that are happening during perimenopause and beyond, I think that you still have a pretty large capacity for change and improvement, because you're coming from a place of your body still has room to make adaptations to. So that's one set of population of people to work with. And then I think probably what I'm finding now where I have to have the most conversation is with athletes who have been athletic for a long time. And you're used to making increases in your performance pretty consistently with training. And now you might be finding that those training situations aren't getting the same results. And you've been, you're just used to performing well for the majority of your time. And that's where you need to sort of step back and look at where you're at right now in your perimenopause, menopause journey, I guess, and looking at aging of if you're already really fit, I think the priority might need to shift to, or may need to shift to maintaining where you're at. That is also a gain, because as we age, our performance and our ability to have strong muscle contractions and to build lean muscle and to build power does decline. And so if you're maintaining and not declining, you are actually improving. It just doesn't feel the same mentally when you're used to having a tangible increase in performance. And so that's sort of like, okay, well, now how am I going to set goals when my goal is used to, I've now wanted to run my marathon 3 minutes faster than I did before. It might need to change to, I need to maintain the time that I have. Or conversely, step back and look at, why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I doing this only for a time outcome or a performance outcome? Or am I doing this because I love to do what I do and want to be able to continue to be able to do these activities? And that's quite like a nuanced conversation to have with athletes, especially if you're used to that performance goal. So this is not an easy conversation, and it's going to take some time for you and for your athletes to manage this. But I think the main component to building the next set of goals is why do I want to do what I'm doing? And if it's outcome based, which it can be, then what is a realistic outcome for where I am right now that's still going to bring me joy by achieving it? Because ultimately that should be what we're looking for, is to have joy in our activities. We have lots of things we have to do. We should be getting some joy from these things that we're choosing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. It's a lot of reframing.
It does come down to that. And I actually just had this conversation with someone yesterday in terms of why.
Yeah.
You know, is the goal to get on the podium every single time? And then if you are at a place where that's not going to happen, for whatever reason, do you now stop? Or do you do it? Or are you actually doing this because you love it? And then you can remove some stress from yourself and always demanding that it be a podium finish. I still want to go and do well, but maybe I can do well because I love to do the sport, versus I'm not going to go because I'm not going to get on the podium. And now you're not doing it at all.
Yeah. I think that there's a component of, as well, of what does it mean to the theme of this whole summit is play to your best.
Yeah.
And what are our expectations around that? And how do we understand when we're in a scenario in which we're against time, that we have such joy in that process of being our best, whatever that looks like, with all the stressors and the other demands that we have in our life. And that's the big one that I see, is that we have this expectation, you know, like if you've been performing all your life, as you say, and then, but now you've got so many other things that you're juggling. And is the expectation realistic? Because you've now said, yeah, but my priority is going to be, you know, I have to care for my aging mother now. Yeah. Or my, you know, aging parents, or I've got whatever other things are happening. You've stepped up in your role in a work situation, because, you know, a lot of us are professional and taking on more responsibility as that comes available to us. And then understanding, but I did everything I could to be smart nutritionally, to recover effectively, to train with intention. And here I am in the process of it. And this is my best today. And what does that feel like to your point, and staying in that present way of being, I think, is really a powerful way of being.
I do. I think it makes a really big difference to just think about why and where we're at, and what's realistic to derive pleasure from what we're doing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really neat. Is there anything, before I ask you the rapid fire questions, is there anything that you wanted you have a free gift. So let's talk about that. So you have the top 7 nutrition tips and recipes to help manage stress through perimenopause.
That's right. So yeah, it just kind of expanded on what we've talked about, because I could talk about it for an hour just on the nutrition and stress component, and probably another hour after that. So I just put together a little package with some of those tips, and gave you some more examples on how to balance blood sugar, how to fuel for your activity, which I think is going to be really important. A couple tips on how to help you sleep, what you can do nutritionally to support good sleep patterns. And then within that, I put together a little recipe book that's got some nutritious items to help you with digestive health, performance outcomes, and some good tasty snacks to keep you going to your next workout.
Oh, that sounds so fabulous. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
Yay. Okay, and here are our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. What is one thing in your work or your learning that you are truly excited about right now?
Yeah, right now I'm looking at utilizing genetics and your 23andMe data to help you manage your stress response.
Woohoo, fun.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole new, just such a cool area of focus. And I'm excited to learn more about what you are finding there. That would be fun to collaborate on.
Happy to share.
Yeah, for sure. So what is one thing that you're grateful for?
I am really grateful for my community and my tribe. I just think they're all so amazing and we can't do these things alone. So all the athletes that I get to train with, all of my friends and colleagues that I work with, and my training partners that I train with, so happy for them all.
Yeah, because they keep us going, don't they?
They do, yeah.
It's so often training becomes so like inward looking, but it's actually the outward that keeps us going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the last question that I have is, what is one principle that you live by?
Meeting people where they're at. In whatever capacity that is. That could be your friendships, that could be with your parents, that could be with your athletes, it could be with someone who's looking for holistic nutrition. Just meeting people where they're at and not forcing your expectation or where you think they should be. Meeting people where they're at, I think, is a priority.
Mm-hmm. And what emotional intelligence that takes.
Yes.
Honestly, like it's an incredible principle.
It is, and you have to put yourself in check because you have what you want for people, and then you have, no, that's not what they want.
That's a whole lot of checking ego at the door.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I really thank you for that. And thank you for being here. What a wonderful conversation.
It's been an absolute pleasure. These summits are amazing, and I'm really happy to have been a part of it.
Thank you.